There's a suit on and there's places to go.
R&B Transmogrification, I think, came out in 97, and then Featuring Birds is 98. But I think that it seems like you had a lot of the material for those two albums around the same time, right? Like you were kind of ready to go.
It was part of, I would say, the tail end of the era where bands would try to make an album a year, because you would make an album, go out and tour. If you got the album out early spring, then you could tour in the spring, take summer off, tour in the fall, and then make another album. Get that, in the summer and the winter, you would be working on the album. And if you could get that released by the next spring, you could start the process over again. You could just keep working. That was the whole thing. It'd be probably better to not, always just be releasing a record. We definitely were rushed some of the time to get it done. But maybe it's better to rush it. I don't know. A lot of the best records, rock and roll records, were made just on the fly like that.
Well, you know what? It's funny that you say about jumping ahead into the actual album itself. On the song's called like Ape Me Still. What is the song? Ape Me Still.
Ape Self Prevails in Me Still.
That sounds like, when you're talking about being rushed, that song kind of encapsulates it, because it's sort of like the band is doing the groove, and then you do the verse, and then you say like, that's it. And then the song kind of plays out for like a little bit longer, and then it sort of ends. It kind of captures that rushed sort of feeling you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it was that right during that time of Janet and I were both playing in other bands and Quasi at the same time. So that was around that time for a few years. She and I both were just on tour all the time or in the studio, which that's what you aspire to. It's the oldest story in the book. You get, the rock and roll musicians getting burned out and so forth. Because some people sustain that for years and years. It was just a few years we were able to do that.
Would the burnout affect your songwriting, or was that just sort of like all encapsulated in the...
Yeah, I think probably. I never, at that time, I was writing on the road on tour. Later, I decided that was a terrible idea, because you're not really living normally, and you tend to write. That's why all these rock and roll bands write these on the road songs. Like I told myself I would never write these kind of, I'm lonely, far from home, on the road, type songs. But that's what it is. You're not doing anything else.
One of the things because I've been like a big fan of yours for like 26, 27 years now. And one of the things I always really liked was the lyrics, and what you just said, like, that's the vibe that I don't get. Like, there's this, like, re-listening to Featuring Birds today, the opening song, like, Our Happiness is Guaranteed. Like, it's got this, like, it sort of has this kind of clinical scientific approach to human existence that's like the antithesis of what you're sort of talking about with the sentimental, being on the road, being lonely kind of songs. And I feel like Featuring Birds has a lot of instances where you are sort of like almost scientifically, quasi-scientifically, let's say, analyzing like human relations and human behaviors and existence.
Yeah, that's what I was writing about. The first, Our Happiness is Guaranteed, is a little bit anomalous in that way. That's more like a science fiction song. I can't remember why I decided to do that. You're always, like I said, we were working really fast. It didn't have a ton of time to think about philosophical questions about what exactly we were doing. We just had to get down to it and do it.
There's a benefit to that, like you sort of alluded to. There's a benefit to that in that you don't really have too much time to think, which can be something that really turns off your analytical brain and allows you to just kind of get into like a flow state. I'm not sure how active you are on the road now, but do you find when there are no constraints or rushes on the creative process now that you enjoy it more, or is it just sort of kind of part and parcel to what's going on?
enjoying is not a very good description of how I feel about the process. I get into it and I get a little obsessed or consumed by it. And there are parts of it that I do enjoy, but for the most part, it's work. It's like I spend sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, just trying to like figure out a line in a lyric. Like that doesn't bother me. It's not that fun exactly, but I like what I do like about it is you kind of disappear into the work and it's all consuming. And in that way, it's an interesting and rewarding experience. But I don't know if I do enjoy touring and performing and also recording, but the actual coming up with material and all that is that's work.
You know what's interesting is I saw you twice. I saw you on the Sword of God tour, and I saw you on the Hot Shit tour. And there was something about with Hot Shit, you were playing more guitar and the songs were more like visceral. Like there's something about that album, and like seeing when I saw you playing that time, I think I talked to you on the Sword of God tour. You know what? It was weird. We were at Spaceland and you were playing pool with Janet, and I was like rapping with you. And I can't remember which time it was because I think both times I saw you, it was at Spaceland, but it was the night that like they declared the Iraq War.
Oh God. Yeah. I do remember that. Yeah. During sound check, they had turned on the news and there was just bombs falling out of the sky. It becomes, it's weird when a situation like that happens, when you realize that your little project and your little life is pretty marginal and these larger things are going on, but you don't know what to do about it. But yeah, originally I was a guitar player. I still am like a lot more, I think, competent on guitar than keyboards. But the reason why I play mainly keyboards now is because of the two hands playing in the two different registers. It's just a fuller sound. But I do enjoy playing guitar, and I'm a better guitar player than a keyboard player by a large margin. So, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You think so? I don't know. On keys, you come up with like really, I don't know. I can't gauge anybody's like keyboard skills or whatever. I mean, obviously you hear people that are like amazing or whatever. You're like James Booker or something. You're like, that's awesome. But like a lot of times I guess gauge people based on the parts they come up with. And that's one of the things re-listening to Quasi the last like few days, you realize like nobody was really making music that sounded like this. And I kind of attribute that the way it seems like you composed a lot of it on the keyboard.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, thank you, because it really, there is no, especially when we're doing keyboard stuff, like now, typically we go on tour, it's just keys and drums. We're the only band that that is doing what we do. There are key and drum duos out there, but not playing anything like the type of music we play. And to me, that's important to do something that's different and distinctive. I'm not sure it's important to other people. But the guitar, the keyboard, I actually try and play as if it were a guitar. I'd want it a little bit to sound like a guitar, and I'm thinking of it as a guitarist more than a keyboardist because I don't have any training as a keyboardist. So if you like guitar and you're used to the stuff that guitars do, the power chords, linear, like riffs, linear type riffs, that's what I'm trying to do on the keys. So, if I have any accomplishment on the keys, it's just coming at it from a guitar player's mind.
What were some of your influences? Like listening to I don't not necessarily the influences dictated what you wrote musically, but tell me some of the stuff tell us some of the stuff that you were like listening to, teenage, whatever, and when you started playing music.
Yeah, the influences really were mostly like teenage stuff. That's the stuff that kind of gets into your brain. Oh, and like in the 20s when I was figuring out how to write, a lot of, some of that stuff I don't even really listen to much now, but it's still probably there in the playing. I think I may come out of punk rock, basically. When I was learning to play, we were playing punk rock clubs with punk rock bands, and it was a little It was right around the time that punk rock was becoming more solidified as like hardcore. So and a lot of people came up in punk rock and liked the scene and the energy and the philosophy behind it, but weren't really into hardcore. And eventually that became, I think, what people now call indie rock. The original sort of first wave were people that came up in the punk rock world, but didn't want just, we're not down with the hardcore scene. And that's basically where I came from, and Janet too. So punk rock was a big deal. At a certain point, I kind of discovered what I guess people would call classic pop, like the Kinks was a big one, and the Beatles, of course, stuff like that. And when I was younger, I listened to metal and prog and all that kind of stuff, which creeps into the work, I think, too.
How about like ELO? Because I was kind of thinking about ELO a little bit, like when I was listening to it today.
Well, when I was, really little, before I got into like serious rock music, I just listened to the radio. We're talking the 1970s. ELO was all over the radio. Stuff that when I was really young, that was playing a lot on the radio. Yeah, that's probably in there too. ELO, I don't know, Stevie Wonder, Elton John, all the, the big bands from the 70s. Also, that stuff's exciting when you're a little kid.
Was that, you were in a band, it was called the Donner Party, right?
Yeah, that was my first band.
And was that like punk? I didn't get a chance to check it out. It's
kind of jangly, I guess. Definitely, all three of us were young and just trying to figure out I never wrote songs before that band. I never sang. We were figuring out how to do all that stuff, how to be a band, really. And, at that was around the time that I had discovered classic pop, and I was starting to write jangly kind of stuff. Like, we started listening to 60s music, but I was also, probably my favorite band at the time was the Meat Puppets, who had around that time started writing more jangly stuff, almost like country music sometimes. And yeah, that's where that band was coming from. But we were really young, just trying to figure it out.
When Quasi started, was there a concerted effort for you to sort of have a specific sound that veered away from the, typical standard fare that was popularized at the time, and kind of shifting like with the alternative rock and even like the more underground indie rock, or were you just sort of just doing your thing and what came out?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of both. I think in Portland, where we were playing at the time, it was a pretty small scene. Everybody was doing different things. And I think it was important in that scene to establish an identity. But we did flounder around for a while. We played with as many as 5 people in the band, but like as a trio, as a quartet, we tried different things. So we were just stumbling, just trying to figure it out. Also, when we started playing as a 2-piece, that is when it started to get more interesting, I think, both for us and for the tiny little audience that might have been on the scene at that time. We didn't really think it out. We experimented until we came to this place.
There is one thing that I was kind of curious of, and I guess it's the obvious thing, and it's sort of the album is featuring birds, and then the actual track Birds is just birds chirping, and then the actual song Birds would be released the next year on Field Studies. What was like the psychology and what was going on with this decision?
Oh, it wasn't. Yeah, it just goes back to what I was saying. We were working so fast. It was a very unsettled, topsy-turvy time in my life. It's just kind of a little nuts. It was like a little bit smart-ass to do that. And also, it just didn't have a ton of time to analyze. The song Birds is a totally separate song. It could have been titled something else. Yeah, we decided to make the title Birds, and it is confusing in that way. But that was a little bit just being contrarians, yeah, but also not thinking about it a lot.
Like the concept of birds, I think as it lyrically comes out in Field Studies, is something that I really relate to what you do lyrically. And I think about it. This is something that I've thought about for like 30 years. Because there's this idea, the idea of free as a bird.
Awesome.
No, I'm serious. I'm dead serious about this. There's this whole idea of you're like free as a bird, and people romanticize birds and stuff, right? But the theme that you have, and I think this is in a lot of your lyrics, especially from this time period, is it's like, look, birds have all this space. They can really go anywhere they want, yet they choose to bicker and fight with each other in these small spaces. Like you have all this space, but yet you're sort of, is condemned the right word, or you're compelled to stay and bicker in these closed spaces. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's bleak, but it's bleak, but it's like it's cynically bleak in a way that I appreciate. It's not offering you a fortune cookie answer the way the free as a bird thing is answering it to you. It's sort of like there's this kind of like inert hopelessness to it, and that's what I like. So there is like this, and you even have like a themed song, Bird's Eye View, on R&B Transmogrification. So I was like really picking up on like the birds theme, and it's just interesting.
Well, birds are, first of all, that birds are amazing creatures. And I think it was probably around that time I started paying attention to birds. And I'm not exactly a birder, but when you're younger, you're living your life. You have work or school, and you're trying to be in a rock band. I'm not looking at the world that much. Like at a certain point, I looked around and like, oh, wow, birds are these things, these beautiful little things that can fly through the sky. It's amazing. So they attracted my attention, and I just kind of got into them. And they're very useful beings because they have resonance as a metaphor, but also in totally non-metaphorical. They're just cool, So I think that's why they work their way into it. But it is true what you were saying. To get back to that, I'm glad that you heard that in there, because it's all about this struggle to just come to terms with your own existence as a human being. Yeah, freedom is a tricky concept, but it's one, we wrestle with it.
It's funny, yeah, because there's like your music is very like proletarian in the sense that you really were like on those albums, you're really like what is it like?
Rent. Pay your bills.
Pay your rent. Pay your bills
for your pills.
So you can work another day as life slowly slips away, And it's like you have like you're very like concerned about financial situations in a way that's very like relatable.
Well, thank you. I mean, but that's really, I think a lot of bands that have had more success than I have had in my bands, I'm very happy to have had the level of success that I've had. And it's great. We can still tour and we have a little audience. But I was working, right up to the time we started touring seriously, and then on and off afterwards too, like low wage jobs. So when that's taken up a lot of your time, you tend to write about that. But a lot of people relate to that. So it's not ideal to you're trying to write songs, you're trying to be a musician, but you got to clock in and go to work. It's not ideal, but in a way it gives you a perspective that a lot of bands that achieve success early on and don't have to go to the regular workaday world, they maybe don't have that. They lose that perspective.
Oh no, I kind of think it gives you artistic longevity though, because it's like the people that really do kind of make it early on. Like, I don't know, man. Like when I was younger and I was writing songs, it's like they're garbage, dude. It would no, it's true, but it's like you never would have got better if you hadn't been kind of screaming into the void for like 15, 20, whatever years and getting whatever sort of small, you get sort of like small feedback from your friends and certain people or whatever. And then and it just makes you keep trying. You never really stop, And I think like all the people that I continuously still listen to are the people that have that sort of thing where they never really stopped. Like they're never really satisfied with what they just did, or something compels them to kind of move forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. although, it's in a way it's a little ironic because we're talking, we've gotten off topic, but theoretically the topic is this album featuring Birds from the 90s. And because that certainly was our most popular record, and it's the one people still like the most. We've made a bunch of them since then, and we're still we're still working, but people are kind of like, that's what they like. So even if you do kind of keep pushing and keep trying to grow and keep taking it from a slightly different angle, typically people are going to like one or two records that you make. That's it. They might like the other ones a little, but it's really only going to be one or two that they love. I'm happy. I'm very glad that we have had that with some people, because it's an amazing, that's all you want as a musician. But then you can still keep working. You have to ignore the fact that people only care about that one record.
Well, a thing that Nick and I have talked about, though, that you kind of have to keep in mind is, like, in your catalog, I don't really go back to featuring Birds a lot. It's one of my favorite of yours, but I don't, because, like, it's really tied up with sort of feelings I had towards this girl that I was dating at the time. And so a lot of it resonates like on such like a deep level memory wise that, like, and like coming back to it now, because I hadn't listened to it in years, and listening to it this last week, I was like, oh yeah. And I felt like detached from a lot of that luggage, because like a lot of what you're saying there, man, like, I never want to see you again, dude. Like, if you're listening to that when you're in a turbulent relationship, as great as that song is, man, you kind of don't want to hear it again, because it really sums up a lot of what's going on in your life, and it's like you did too good of a job, it's so you have to keep that in mind. Sometimes you do too good of a job.
Well, that's very flattering. Thank you. I mean, and you mentioned that you were into the touch and go records, the Hot Shit and Sort of God. I think Hot Shit is the better of those two. Yeah, by that time we had, moved on. I think like Featuring Birds and Field Studies are kind of a little bit cut from the same cloth. And then we tried to get a little bit more back to basics for when we got onto Touch and Go and did those records. So they're a little bit different, but I guess, whatever we do, there's going to be some very common elements, because it's just the two of us doing our thing.
For the record, you talked about that Featuring Birds being the one that everybody likes. Steve's on the record saying that he likes another album. I'm more of a Field Studies guy myself. So you got two contrarians right here, championing different albums for you.
Well, like I said, thank you. It makes me happy to hear. I'm grateful that any record that I made at any point in my life has reached people in a way that means anything to them. Because I'm a fan too. I listen. I'm no different from you guys. I'm listening to music all the time. I have records that are a big deal to me. To think that I might have done something that has a similar effect on other people as other records have to me, it's amazing. I don't. It's fine that it happened in the 90s. Anytime. But yeah, we still are working.
Well, what the gap in out? So you put an album out in like around 2013, and then you just put one out recently around 2023.
Yeah,
is that right? Are you guys back on the horse? Are you guys going to be putting anything out, or did you just take some time off to like get away from stuff? Or
yeah, it's definitely a different world from like what I was saying before, the 1 year album cycle. For a while we tried to kind of make it more like a 2 year cycle, and then it just not really a cycle anymore. It just kind of happens when it happens, and you write it out. So we are still working, but there's not really an album in the works. We have to wait until, I don't know, something happens. I don't even know what it is, but at a certain point, some impetus, something switches over, and you're like, oh well, it seems like we're moving towards an album. That's more how it is now.
Did you feel like you? I remember when I was talking to you at Spaceland, I brought up Mike City's Sons, and Janet was like, "Oh God!" Like you brought that up, like that was '96. Did you feel like did you get a little bit of like a boost of your like career wise from like being associated with that album or with that band, or was it just like a headache all the way through?
That album at the time, it didn't go anywhere. We hardly sold any records. We did a little tour to support that record. It wasn't well attended. So wow. It wasn't a career boost in any way. By that time, Elliot already was doing his solo stuff, and that was having more success. So if anything, that, and Janet and I ended up touring with him as his backup band. And then Quasi would open those shows. I would say that maybe gave us more a boost than Heat Miser, which just, now people like it. But back then it was just nowhere.
That album in particular has had a huge revival over the last, like, what would you say, Nick, like 5 years? Like people are like way into, and I mean, that is, I put that up there with a lot of like Elliott Smith's best records. Like I think that like The Fix Is In and a lot of those songs are just like really, they're great. But then you also hear and read the documentary things about him like keeping the engineers up all night just to record Half Right or whatever. And you're like, oh God, it must have been like arduous.
Well, we were, yeah. I mean, that wasn't unusual to record late into the night. It wasn't like a 9-to-5 job. So I don't, but it was, there was a lot of stress in the band at that time. Yeah. I mean, eventually people came around to it and it's been reissued, got it like a deluxe reissue, like just last year, I think, a couple years ago. I can't remember when. And it's cool. I like that record and I liked it even back then, but the cards were stacked against it really. So it's nice that it's getting a little bit of play all these years later, especially for Neil, who wrote a lot of the best songs on there.
Yeah.
And he never, Elliot kind of took off after that, but Neil just kind of fell into obscurity after that. And now he's getting some recognition for his contributions. And Neil and I are still really close. He's like my brother. So I'm happiest for him that his work from that time is starting to be more recognized.
Yeah, I like the magic in that album, that especially if anybody that listens to that album, if they're aware of sort of the psychic weight that you guys went through, or just, through rumors or whatever's documented or reported on, how it, despite like the counterbalance to what you guys went through and were dealing with at that time, was this just really incredible thing that captivates a lot of people, man. It's cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. Yeah, I am glad. We were all insane at that time. So that didn't really, that didn't contribute to like a smooth process for sure. But everybody just was trying to make music as the best music that we could make. And that's still the case for me now. But in those days, it was the same. I'm a little less insane now, but in a way, I wasn't writing those songs or singing them. I was just there. I contributed a little bit, and it was cool to be a part of that band at that time. But yeah, it was a little bit stressful at times.
How much would you say? The group of musicians that you came up with and then took off with, it's a high level bunch of musicians and producers and just really interesting artists. I don't know how much would you say your knives were sharpened just by kind of being in that, and how much it affected the creative output that you had for your band and for any other project that you're doing?
Well, I don't know. Heat Miser, I joined the band. They originally had a different bassist. I just joined because the first bass player left the band, and they had a tour scheduled, and we were friends. We would just hang out. It was a small scene. They were friends of mine. I used to it's weird, but I used to shoot hoops with Elliot on the playground. You know what I mean? That was we were just in bands. Yeah, it wasn't, it just, that's just how it all happened, really. And all the other associations over the years that I've had are kind of similar in a way. I've been very lucky. I've got to work with a lot of excellent musicians, but typically I meet them out in the world somewhere and we hit it off and it's yeah, let's do something. That's how it's always worked out for me.
What other bands in the 90s in that because that's the real primo indie period. What other bands bands and records in the 90s were you just really enthusiastic about and just thought were great?
There was a lot, really, but there were records that I listened to a lot, but I also was seeing a lot of shows. And to me, the shows were really where that was the real proof, the pudding where the proof was, the shows. Saw some great shows, but I remember, around that time I was listening to Cat Power, Blues Explosion, which, I was lucky enough to be able to work with John Spencer in later years because they were one of my favorite bands at that time. I remember, in fact, seeing Blues Explosion and Jesus Lizard did a tour where they played together,
wow.
Two of the best live bands, at that time. You couldn't touch them, either one of those. And they both were playing the same show. That show blew my mind. So yeah, listening to a lot of that type of stuff, but also I don't even remember a lot of local bands that would play and I thought they were great and they maybe never have got anywhere all the time.
I was just going to ask that. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but even I've been playing in the local scene for a long time. And that some of the coolest stuff that I've been excited about are those bands that you find just being in your scene. There's always a band or two that kind of blows your mind that they're there for a moment and then they're gone. And a lot of the times they don't even have any recorded material and about them, but the world's never going to know about them. And they're just gone forever. Yeah. But you got it right here, and you're just I got to see this band that nobody's ever going to know about.
Right. In the 90s and earlier, especially because it wasn't, you couldn't just record your band on your computer at home and put it on Bandcamp or what, you know what I mean? You had to it was hard. You had to get some money, rent a studio out and make a physical record, which took money and resources. And a lot of bands didn't get that done. Even bands that were great, that had a lot of great ideas, it was a big filter that, doesn't really exist now.
I have to say, before we wrap things up, I want to say that as being someone who was born and raised in Venice, California, and lived in California my whole life, the song California is a perfect, I don't know, with 2 minutes or however long it is, it's a perfect encapsulation of California.
Well, I mostly grew up in California. I mostly in Orange County and Mission Viejo. I lived in San Francisco in the 80s before moving up here in 89. So I did try to move back to California because my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we've been married forever, was looking for a job there. And I thought, well, I can go back. Well, I'll go down there with you. And I went back and I just almost had a nervous breakdown. I just couldn't, I couldn't see finding work. I couldn't see making music. I just ran with my tail between my legs back to Portland where I could go back to crashing at a punk rock house and working a low wage part-time job and being in a band and making that work. That was the days when it just wasn't possible in California anymore. Although in the 80s, it was very possible. That's how I lived at that time. But, after tech sort of took over, it just trashed the whole thing. But Venice, I had a friend who lived in Venice, right, if I remember right, his back door just kind of basically opened up onto the boardwalk. I thought it was pretty interesting. I haven't spent a lot of time there, though.
Well, it's weird because when I was a kid, there was this idea that you could feel I knew guys because it's you figure I was a teenager and there was a warehouse music. I used to go hang out at. And
Sure.
like the guys that worked there were guys that moved to LA from like Virginia or whatever, and they played in bands. They had like long hair. They're like rocker dudes working at a record store. And the places that they lived at, I mean, they lived together, whatever, but it was totally like feasible and affordable.
Yeah.
This is the 90s. And now that whole sort of experience, when you think about it from the mindset I have now, it's so untenable. It is science fiction.
I don't know how kids, artists, musicians, whatever, I don't know how they survive anymore, because I just, yeah, I mean, it was just, you would go from one punk house or group house to another. When you stopped getting along with your housemates, you just moved to another house or whatever. Or maybe you'd have to sublet your place to go on tour, and then they didn't want you to come back. You know, all that. There was no tragedy because there was all these group houses that were cheap. You could go anywhere, get a room with a bunch of other punk rockers for a nominal fee and survive. But yeah, I don't know how people, and that allowed young people to have, I don't know if freedom's the right word, but
autonomy.
Yeah, you weren't just always working. You could get by without working too much if you were willing to live on the cheap. It was at least possible to do that. It's very difficult to do that anywhere anymore. I don't know. There probably smaller towns in different places. For a while, Detroit or someplace like that was possible. But yeah, I'm not even sure that's true anymore. Certainly not on the West Coast, though. I want
to ask you like a random question, and then Nick can cut it out or whatever. But I remember, because I read on your website, this is a long time ago, you'd recommended the book, The Revolution of Everyday Life by Raoul Vaneigem.
Yeah, I think it's for Vaneigem, but
he was a situationist. And yeah, you had recommended it. I went out and bought it. I was just wondering how you came across that, and like what impact it had, and if it still impacts you, or if you're just kind of like, I don't know.
Well, I still have the book, and I've read it maybe a couple times. And what I decided eventually is the most relevant thing about the book, and the most important thing that you can take away from the book, is just the title itself. You know what I mean? And basically it's about, instead of, taking up arms and overthrowing the government and having a war or whatever, it's the things that you can do to subvert the status quo and the social structure that tends to benefit only the rich and powerful, right? So to subvert that, to make change in some small way, it's an everyday things you can do every day in your normal life. You don't have to, like, revolution isn't a separate thing from your everyday life. It has to do with decisions you make all the time. That's not precisely what the book's about, but in a general way, that's the gist of the very basic level what the book's about.
Yeah, would you consider, like, it's probably like a kind of an exert ethos sort of, but like the idea, like when somebody comes out with like a new album, I'm always like, well, I'm gonna, even if I listen to it on that I'm a fan of, even if I listen to it on like Spotify or whatever, I'm gonna like make the point of going and purchasing the record, where you still are like it's like I think like voting is like garbage for the most part. Like, it's not achieving anything, right? But I think you kind of can vote with like your dollars. So the things that you choose to support artistically, to like, you like make a point to go see you guys play or something, to buy merch, things like that, as opposed to just dumping more money into like Starbucks or something, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, I think where you spend your money is a thing that can be an informed and purposeful thing. And it's also, so you're musicians, right? So when you make music, the point is not to simply try and find a way to plug in to this mass market corporate capitalist system with your music, but to make something that's human and real, that doesn't necessarily conform, perhaps even subverts these sort of corporate capitalist norms. That doesn't, you can do that just singing love songs or whatever. It's like a few years ago, Beyonce came out with an album where she was, there was a lot of imagery, Black Panther stuff, and she was sort of using revolutionary imagery, to some extent, like sloganeering and so forth. And people were kind of into it, but I was like, that's like, no, because that's just style. She was like, she co-opted this revolution, the true revolutionaries who were at the street level trying to make change in their community. She took that and like just used it to make the most mass market corporate thing, right? So that's like counter-revolutionary.
Yeah.
So, but you don't have to like put a beret on and like start using Black Panther slogans in your music to actually subvert the powers that be, the dominant social economic structure and so forth. You can do it by the way that you go about your decisions as a band and the way that you present your music that points to a path away from corporate capitalism and to something better, right? But just simply being a genuine human being, it gets harder and harder in the days, in these days. And that could be as much of a revolutionary act as anybody can do anymore.
Hey,
Great.
man, we just thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to meet up with us, man, and have a conversation with us. We appreciate it.
Oh, no, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you for the informed and thoughtful questions.
Well, we didn't plan it. We didn't plan them out. This is like impromptu.
Well, you didn't have to because you know what you're talking about, right? A lot of journalists, they don't know. It's like they have to research it because they don't know at all. They might be successful in their research or not, but you can wing it if you know what you're doing. So anyway, thank you. I'm gonna break off and go eat some food.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.